I'm not good at things the first time. People can't tell because I do things over and over again until they look easy. But if you give me almost any task, I will fail it the first time. But on the fourth or fifth time, I'm going to be coming for you. Fourth or fifth time, it's going to be on. And school never let me feel that feeling. With school, it was always, well, you're a dummy. Like one of the first things I remember, and this is why one of the things I tell teachers is, don't put student work on the board. They don't want it up there. I'm speaking from the other 2/3 of the class. 1/3 of them loves it. 2/3 do not. You know what I learned from the work being on the board? I learned that I'm the only kid that only gets red stars. Tony and Carolyn, they get gold stars. I never got a gold star. That's what I learned.
That's Jon Corippo, and he needs no introduction. But no matter how well you think you might know him, as Jon today shares a more personal side of why he's on a mission to transform education, you'll realize you may not know him as well as you thought. He's the author of the incredibly popular EduProtocols. He's been recognized as a County Teacher of the Year, a 20 to Watch Educator by the NSBA. He's an Apple Distinguished Educator, a Google Certified Innovator, and a Microsoft Innovative Educator. He served over a decade at the K-8 level, opening a one-to-one project-based high school, serving in 2 county offices, including assistant superintendent and as an IT director. Jon is incredibly proud of the work he did with CUE, where he served as the Chief Learning Officer and Executive Director. Under Jon's leadership, the CUE Professional Learning Organization trained over 60,000 educators. I hope you enjoy my conversation today with Jon Corippo.
How do you navigate change? It's a question we think about often, and one that today's world expects us to be comfortable with. The challenge, however, is where do you begin, and how do you develop the mindset and skills to be successful? You're listening to Designing Schools, and I'm your host, Dr. Saba Kidwai, educator, researcher, and storyteller. Join me each week for stories and strategies that bridge the gap between research and practice, as together we explore how might we design schools.
It's fascinating how we can know someone for so many years, yet not really know them at all. That's what I've been thinking about after recording this episode with Jon. I've always seen the energized, committed, and innovative side of him, but today we learn the personal side as he opens up and shares his own experiences as a student and how that shaped him into the leader he is today. Jon played an influential role in my own growth as a professional, both directly and indirectly. I know I'm not alone in this sentiment, as he's done this for many. He was indirectly involved when he was the executive director of CUE. In 2012, I attended my first CUE conference. It expanded my view of the different roles and opportunities that existed to me as a high school social science teacher. And it also showed me what was possible with technology in my classroom. It's what set me on the path to pursuing a speaking career, to being more active on social media, both of which allowed me to take on leadership roles. He directly played a role in my career over the past 4 years while I was at Apple. It's no secret that once you join Apple, people tend to disappear from social media. Solving for how you can stay active on social as part of this incredible community that I had built while respecting Apple's boundaries was probably one of the most ultimate design thinking challenges I've ever taken on. Jon helped tremendously. He kept me in the loop through speaking invitations, mentorship, but above all, he helped me stay relevant through community. Showing people new opportunities is in Jon's blood. And most recently, he's traveled to over 155 classrooms, sharing the power of education technology through his EduProtocols. So I begin by asking Jon to share what he's been seeing around the world.
I love the cold opener. So I was in a classroom last year, and I've started doing consulting. And what I'm telling people is, I don't think teachers know what a highly creative and socially, culturally ready class looks like. I don't think they know what it looks like. And so what I've been doing with all these districts that I'm working with is I go do classroom takeovers. I've done as many as 7 in a day. That damn near killed me. So I've asked them now let's do a limit of like 4 or 5. But what I do is I just walk in and I take kids through 2 or 3 of the EduProtocols. And the assistant soup and 4 principals are just literally, oh my God, these are the same kids that I watched yesterday do nothing, right? And maybe one of the best comments I've heard all year was we had 4 principals, an assistant soup, 5 or 6 teachers watching me do a demo math lesson. Bear in mind, Saba, these are kids I do not know at all. They may not even know my name, but we're just working, right? We're working. And one teacher sitting with her arms kind of crossed. And my friend Robert looks over and he goes, "What are you thinking? Your body language says you're processing." And she says, "I don't know if this is real teaching." And right then the teacher swings by and goes, "My Asperger's kid that does nothing just came in third and book it." And so he was like, well, maybe real teaching is not what we're going for. Maybe real teaching, finger quotes up, is not a thing. How's that first fast start?
That's amazing. But you know what I would love is for you to talk about, like, let's actually dive into that. Like, what do you mean? What do you think they meant when they said real teaching? And why do you think people struggle to adapt and adopt? Like, I just posted about this morning. It's been over a century since Dewey talked about experiential learning. It's been 10 years since that first Q conference that I went to with you. That is a long time. What do people mean by real teaching? And why do you think people struggle to transition?
This is my take. So I'm an emergency credential teacher. So I didn't go through a teaching program. I went through advertising and journalism. But my wife's boss recruited me into teaching. Yeah. So my original degree is in advertising. Why not marketing? Too much math. I didn't want stats. And advertising falls in journalism, no stats. So I switched into teaching at about age 30. And my first year, I had a great year with the kids. Like the kids and I were a thing. We were jamming. But academically, I was a dumpster fire. Like it was not good. And so I spent the whole summer looking over my test scores. Well, not the whole summer. I guess in those days, we got the test scores around early July. And I had a really come to Johnny meeting all summer. And so I bought Why Johnny Can't Read. I bought Why Our Children Can't Read and What You Can Do About It by Diane McGinnis. I bought Dumbing Us Down. I started becoming a real researcher of education. And so that's like a sidebar for me for the last 20 years or so. And if you watch movies like Most Likely to Succeed, if you watch movies like Waiting for Superman, if you see movies like Race to Nowhere, and then probably my favorite education book of all is Dumbing. Dumbing Is Down got me started. The End of Average by Todd Rhodes. Stunning. The bell curve is actually designed by racists to hold people back, which in a very general way, we are accidentally moving that agenda forward. And so here's the nexus of all of that, Saba. Teachers walk into classrooms. They are assigned random kids. They tell the kids that you have to respect my rules and my deal, because that's what I do around here. People respect me. And then we talk and talk and talk and talk. And then we have kids do a worksheet or answer the questions at the end of the book. And this is the really insidious part. Some kids will take the bait and they'll do it. And we pronounce them good students. And some kids, I'm thinking of me, are underwhelmed. And they're going to do the least amount possible. That's what I did. I was at a 2.9 GPA all the way through school. I was doing the least possible to keep my parents off my back and stay football eligible. And that system has been maximized. We've gotten everything we can out of that system. And, you'll hear a lot of administrators, and if you're an administrator listening, you'll hear a lot of administrators say, "What's the data say, John? What does the data say? And we've got to look at the data." I can't tell you how many meetings. Teachers, we have to look at the data. Here's what the data is telling me, Saba. Over the last 50 years, according to NAEP, National Assessment of Educational Progress, we've had no growth in reading, math, or science. None. And I'm not comparing us to Malaysia or Finland. This is us versus us. We haven't grown. And you know why? Because nobody has understood the history of teaching, which is the end of average. Teaching is built to hold some kids back so that teachers can say, "Fare thee well." I know classrooms where AP teachers have told kids it's impossible to get an A in this class. And one brave kid raises his hand and he says, "Do you mean like really hard?" And the teacher says, "No, I literally don't give an A." That mindset all goes back to the idea that teachers have to protect colleges from uppity kids. Now, here's a fun fact. Steve Jobs graduated from what college? None. Zuckerberg graduated from what college? None. Larry Ellison graduated from what college? I'm pretty sure he didn't. Not sure, totally sure, pretty sure he didn't. And even Bill Gates, they didn't graduate. Those guys are making money like crazy. And and so we have been fed this lie by the big machine that if you come to school and you're all shined up and you do all the work and you get good grades, you'll be rewarded with a good school. And if you go to a good school, you'll be rewarded with a good job. And you know what kids are finding out right now? That is not true when they're working at Amazon with a business degree. And so we have got to change the whole system. And now I'm going to finally answer your question. Why do we still teach this way? Because we're codependent. If your parents smoke, the odds of you smoking are higher. And I'm going to make it funny now. If your parents like the Raiders, you have an irrational love for the Raiders or the Dodgers, right? Those kinds of things are familial. And like it or not, almost all of us have a minimum of 13 years of codependency on this is what teaching is. And I'll tell you one more quick story because I like you talking too, and I'm going on and on. When I played football at Fresno State, I was a walk-on. But after that, I got a chance to be a graduate assistant. And that was cool because I was getting rewarded for my brain, not my physique. And I was really into that. So I'd been coaching for maybe 12 minutes. And I yelled at a guy who did a good thing, who's probably a foot taller than me and might have actually been older than me. I yelled, "Good job, son." And I'm thinking, bro, what just came out of my mouth? And I realized that those are things coaches say. And I was a coach now. So I had to say coachy things. One of my favorite examples, I'm pretty sure that this is an end of average and in outliers, the Stanford experiment. When you tell people they're guards, they act like guards. When you tell people they're prisoners. So what we're doing is manifesting a lot of the abuse that was put on us subconsciously by saying things like, that's not real teaching. Dude, I don't care what real teaching is. I want growth. And Saba, for your listeners who may not be familiar, I roll in on classrooms routinely and get 30, 40, 50 points worth of academic growth within 20 to 30 minutes, routinely, over and over. It's like clockwork. It's crazy. So there's my cold open hot lead for you. Where do we go from that?
Jon poses a very valid question. Do we know what teaching and learning look like in today's world? What is real teaching? It's been a century since Dewey advocated for moving away from teacher-centered towards learner-centered classrooms, designed around students' strengths and interests, developing emotional intelligence through social interactions and through solving real-world problems. It's also hard to believe that it's been a decade since the introduction of iPads and Chromebooks, which many believed would serve as the catalyst to fulfilling the century-old vision held by Dewey. This reflection turned into an article that I published last week on why it's time for an innovation gap analysis. It's a model that was created by authors Clark and Estes. If you want to move away from a fragmented approach to how we evolve teaching and learning practices, align your problems with solutions, and maximize your investment in technology with data, then it begins with a gap analysis. You have to know where you are to orient your GPS to where you want to go. The gap analysis model has 3 stages. The first one is to define your goals. The second stage is to determine what gaps exist in 3 specific areas: knowledge gaps, motivation gaps, and organization gaps. The authors share the analogy of people to cars when talking about these gaps. They say knowledge is the engine and transmission. Motivation is the fuel that energizes the system, or in today's world, the battery. And that organization gaps are the road conditions. Each of these areas, knowledge, motivation, and organizational gaps, must be aligned for organizations to evolve. So we've done stages 1 and 2, define goals and determine gaps. This now positions us for stage 3, to choose solutions and evaluate outcomes. Think about the last time you adopted a new curriculum, a new technology initiative, or implemented any new practice. How did you actually decide that your solution matched your problem? No matter where you are in your journey, this is the perfect time for a gap analysis. You can find the template in the show notes along with the article that details the process, or you can visit www.designingschools.org. Oftentimes, we see what someone is doing now, yet we don't always realize the many different things they've done to get to where they are now. At a time where many are contemplating a career change, I asked Jon to share how his career has evolved over the years.
One of the things that you keep saying to me when we talk is, you've done so many different things. There's a lot of people that teach and they go to work for a district and they work for the district for 20 years. Happily, we're moving away from the people that work in one room for 20 years. That's kind of weird. That freaks me out. So I started teaching in Clovis, and I told my wife, I don't think I'll ever teach anywhere else because Clovis has this really systematic, high support approach, and I don't want to work in one of those wackadoo schools where everybody's going for it. There's no plan. Well, then we had a baby, and I was commuting an hour and 20 minutes each way. My wife's like, it's time for you to work locally. So this is hilarious. So she just totally went to the local school and said, hey, my husband's an emergency credential teacher. You should probably hire him. She was working at the other school. And so I interviewed and got the job. Well, I did that for a couple of years. And I guess it could be my ADHD. I use my ADHD to get more things done. My logic is ADHD people just operate at a different tempo than other people. That doesn't make it good or bad. I'm not saying slow people are bad, even though slow has a negative connotation sometimes. It's okay to be particular and it's okay to be mindful. But for me, I like to get things done. So I worked in that school for a couple of years. I got nominated for an award. I ended up going to this event down in Ojai called Teach the Teachers. Blew my mind. Hall Davidson and Scott Smith. Oh my God. I didn't know that's what education can be like. So flash forward a couple of months, I'm at an event. This lady walks by and goes, you're Jon Corippo, you're good for me. And I was like, okay, but hey, crazy lady, I don't even know who you are. Well, that turned into me working as a CTAP coordinator for Fresno County Office of Education. And I did that for years. Then I happened to be driving by a school in my kids' district that was opening a new high school. I was literally driving by the day they were doing the dynamite golden shovel thing. So I stopped. I just was there. I come around the corner and the superintendent goes, I want you to open my school. And I go, which school? He goes, this school. And I go, it's not built yet. He goes, come back in 6 months. So opened the school and it was great. Did that with Mike Niehoff for about 5 or 6 years. That was Minarets High School. Got to reimagine a high school from the ground up. Cool fact about Minarets, there's a student bill of rights.
I was going to say, let's pause and talk about Minarets because I think that was really a big turning point. What year was this?
2008.
Okay, because this is a time I think before it became as proliferated as it did in terms of one-to-one technology and things like that. Very few people were thinking about things in that way at that time. Tell us what you did at Minaret.
Well, so the story of Minarets goes like this. It's got a fun beginning. I was actually working in the neighboring district. And I was at a meeting. I was on the steering committee. And the superintendent from the other district said, and I quote, well, you know what kind of school Minarets is going to be in. We don't want that kind of kid in our school. And I was like, what kind of kids are these? And he said to the whole steering committee, well, these are those kind of kids that need career tech ed. And that's not the kind of kids we want at our school. And I was like, bro, you've just offended me as a parent, as a human, as an educator, as a staff member, literally just tore right through me. So literally that next day I called the other superintendent. I said, I heard you're opening a high school. I'd like to be part of that. That's how that started. So flash forward a couple of years and I meet Mike Niehoff. Actually, it was funny. I helped interview him. And we decided that high school as a construct in 2007 was on its last legs. And so we started a high school where we were going to make the kids the most important thing, not the teachers. And we did insane things like we gave the kids quarterly surveys in every class. Quarterly surveys in every class. And it was really freaking teachers out. They were like, what if the kids say something nasty? And you might want to not be weird because surveys are coming. So you might want to treat them appropriately. And we went MacBooks. We went one-to-one take-home MacBooks. I know that we were the first MacBook program between Los Angeles and San Francisco in our area. But we also went Google and we also went project-based, which looking back, we weren't project-based as much as we were anti-worksheet. I learned a lot more about what project-based really is later. But the goal was not having kids just sitting and listening and not having kids just doing worksheets. And I had a couple of my EduProtocols under my belt at that point, but I didn't know exactly what to do with them. The protocols really started in 99, but I hadn't named them that yet, and I hadn't met Marlena yet. So anyways, we went along like that for a while. And then I'm walking down the hallway and I'm seeing teachers doing word walls with high school kids, and I'm seeing lectures, and I'm walking in and all the laptops are put away, and I'm like, hey, where are their laptops? And they said, oh, they don't need their laptops. I'm teaching. And I was like, oh my God, did you just say that right now? And one other thing I did that I think was kind of helpful for me was I taught film and English while I was an administrator. So I was having to eat my own dog food, so to speak. And that was quite the growing experience. And then there was a point where, and all my kids have gone through minarets and they've all gone and done really well. And the other high school, we drained 300 kids out of their school that transferred and came to our school. You want to hear the reasons? Number one, we started at 9. And do you know why we started at 9? Because when I worked in the other district, I asked that teacher, why do you guys start at 9? I mean, at 7:30. They started at 7:30. And she goes, well, we like to have our afternoons off. And I was like, well, what about all the kids that have to get up at 5:30 every day? They may not like that. And she goes, no, it's not about the kids. And I was like, whoa. So one of the first things we did when we were designing the new high school was, let's start at 9. And our kids could sleep in until 8, roll out of bed and hit the bus and be at school by 9. The other thing we decided to do is really listen to the kids and talk to the kids about their experience. Because in the end, high school is their experience. They only get to be a freshman once. They only get to be a sophomore once. They only get to leave for college once. We end up seeing them as kids who just come and pass through our system. But that's not. Every year is 1 year for them. It's their only chance at that year. So to build culture, we started doing a lot of things like what has now turned into Smart Start, where the first couple of days of school, we put them in rotations and all the kids rotated around. We were only 300 or 400 kids then, but we made sure that every kid knew every teacher. And whenever possible, every kid knew every kid in the school. It wasn't totally possible, but we got pretty close. And we noticed that there was no fighting until maybe our first fight was in November, and it was frankly fairly pathetic, which for high school, that's a thing. And that went really good. And then as any organization, and you've probably read this before, Saba, the longer an organization exists, the more conservative it begins to become because it starts to be worried about survival versus creation. And so there was a point where I said, okay, we're not advancing anymore. We're settling in. So another job opened as a director of curriculum up in Mariposa. And long story short, I ended up doing that. And then the superintendent quit. So I was the assistant soup all of a sudden. Did that for a couple of years. And then the Q job opened. And that was really cool because now I was doing PD full time, which I had done at Fresno County office when I was there too. So now I've worked in 4 school districts at this point and 2 county offices. Then I went to work for Q, trained around 50,000 teachers in 5 years. I mean, we were blowing it up. Saba did some PD with us too.
I was one of those.
Yeah. And then we did events at like Skywalker Ranch and on aircraft carriers. It was really fun. And then last year I said, I don't know if I like this whole admin thing. So I went back to the classroom full time, taught 6th grade, made up the difference in my income. Wow. That was a small check. Made up the difference on my income with some consulting. And my side hustle became my full-time hustle. So I went back to the classroom last year, really at age 58 as a 25th year teacher. And I thought, I'm going to go back and really sharpen the sword right now. I got a lot of ideas over the last 6 years, and I made a lot of new ones last year. So I think the final count is I've had 11 principals, 5 superintendents, 2 county offices, Q gig. My last year at Q, I did 134 nights in Marriott's. That's a lot of travel. That's just Marriott's. And I'm on pace to beat that right now this year. So like I said, 155 classrooms this year. And that's literally taking over classrooms for teachers. And almost every time they're like, dude, I loved the way my kids were when they were hanging out with you. And I was like, here's the deal. That's not a talent. It's a technique. I'm doing techniques that make those reactions happen. And one of my favorite ones last week, we were going along and there was this one kid in Nearpod, named himself Jar Jar. And I go, bro, is Jar Jar really your name? And he goes, no. And I go, that is a horrible nickname. Look up Star Wars. You don't want to name yourself Jar Jar in general. And the kids are all cracking up. And then another kid was Jake. And I was like, Jake from State Farm, that Jake? And he's like, yeah, that's me. So, just really being able to hang out with kids and having a good time is what I'm modeling as much as the protocols and the academics.
If there's one takeaway I hope you leave with from listening to Jon, it's that change starts with where you are. It's easy to think if I left where I was, then I would be able to do X. That's rarely the case. We often think that if everything we needed aligned, then we could do the things that we want to do. As is so famously shared by many, creativity happens in constraints. Navigating those constraints is what opens the door to opportunities through the work you do and the relationships that you build along the way. A critical piece in this work that's often missing for many is sharing with others what you're doing, but not just the end product. People want to hear about the process. This is what we call leadership and social influence. If you're interested in learning more, I invite you to join the waitlist for the upcoming workshop that I'll be hosting on how to apply these strategies. You can find the link in the show notes or send me a DM and let me know that you want to join the list. Those who've experienced how powerful this can be are always looking for opportunities to give back and share more widely. You'd be surprised how few people actually do this. I asked Jon to share what motivates him to give back and help thousands of others navigate their careers in education.
It's kind of a birthday effect, I think. I'm not sure exactly why I do that. Probably the biggest thing is empathy. School was really painful for me. I was an introvert. Most of my teachers considered me basically a non-person. I was usually the shortest kid in class, all that stuff. I was also 1 year younger than most of the kids in my class. So I'm a July 1st birthday. And I didn't understand what that meant at the time. I'm not good at things the first time. People can't tell because I do things over and over again until they look easy. But if you give me almost any task, I will fail it the first time. But on the fourth or fifth time, I'm going to be coming for you. Fourth or fifth time, it's going to be on. And school never let me feel that feeling. With school, it was always, well, you're a dummy. Like one of the first things I remember, and this is why one of the things I tell teachers is, don't put student work on the board. They don't want it up there. I'm speaking from the other 2/3 of the class. 1/3 of them loves it. 2/3 do not. You know what I learned from the work being on the board? I learned that I'm the only kid that only gets red stars. Tony and Carolyn, they get gold stars. I never got a gold star. That's what I learned. That's a form of public shaming. Look at all the work. So the adult version of that is, well, if Jon tried harder, he could do better. One of the things that I got a red star on was coloring. I'm colorblind. My ducks are the wrong color. This is a true story. My ducks are the wrong color. So I got downgraded. Instead of just saying, hey, good job coloring, my feedback was your ducks are the wrong color. So I have a lot of empathy for the amount of time that's wasted in school. And I guess it may even be trauma experience for me, PTSD thing. But when I see bad classrooms, I can't help it. And when I say bad classrooms, I should probably say classic classrooms. One of my favorite things that happened all year, close your eyes and visualize Home Alone. Visualize a little squirrely kid from Home Alone, right? I'm in a classroom with that guy, and I'm watching that guy because he is squirmy dude, man. He's squirming around. And I can tell that he is not a guy that gets a lot of wins in class. Guess what happened? We put him in to look at, and on the fourth round, he came in third or second. And he's not used to winning at school. And he literally yells out, "This is way better." And I walked over and I go, "Way better than what, dude?" And he goes, "Well, pretty much everything so far." And to be able to do that for a kid is just about the best thing. So I think now that my therapist, Saba here, I think to some degree I'm working through some PTSD that I had.
And I think that's a really important point that you raise. It's one I think about often is sort of this relationship between mental health and motivation and mindset and assessment that's built throughout our system. I remember early on during the pandemic when all webinars were like a free for all, I actually sat in on a Dean Graziosi and Tony Robbins joint webinar. And I remember I was so overwhelmed by the chat because all people wanted was to be validated. That's all they were there for, was to hear they're good enough to do whatever idea it is that they have. Talk to me a little bit about the relationship between assessment and mental health.
Ooh, oh my God, I can go on and on. Let's just start with this one. So let me get this straight. Teachers have low scores, so they then tell kids, you're not a good test taker. Wow. That's a pretty heavy load to put on somebody for the rest of their life. And I've seen many kids who the mom starts with this, she's not a good test taker. Well, that's not a thing. If you know how to spell, you can always spell. If you know how to write, you can always write. It may be that you weren't prepared well for the test, but this idea that you're going to just fall apart on the test, that's on the teacher, that's not on the kid. How about the fact that the state test in California is arbitrarily higher passing score than almost every other state? Did you know that? Yeah. When you sign up with I'm pretty sure it's who's Ross Perot's companies, with a company that makes it, IBS, International Data Systems or something like that, you as a state get to tell them how high, what's the cut mark. You get to decide the cut mark. Yeah. California chose the highest possible cut mark with the cliched idea that if you raise the bar, the kids will respond. Yeah, as long as it's not developmentally inappropriate. And if anybody thinks I'm wrong, I have a challenge for you. I'm going to win, by the way. Look up Common Core or CASP, CAASPP practice test. Go to the 5th grade math performance task and you see if you can pass it. I had to stop. I was like, I can't do this. I'm a college educated adult, can't do this. So when the state tells individuals they're big dummies at math institutionally, what does that do to somebody's self-image? When the state tells you you're a big dummy, what's that do? I guarantee you an SEL assembly and a pencil is not going to fix that. Guarantee. So we as adults are culpable for creating the conditions in which people have a negative image, right? So 1 day a year or 2 days a year, the teacher says stuff like, oh, I'm going to give you chewing gum because it raises your scores. Dude, that is straight up gaslighting kids. I don't give them anything special. Today, we worked yesterday. We're going to work today. This is the work. You've done the work. Do the work. Go. And they know how to work long enough and hard enough to get things done. And yet, I mean, I can't tell you how many stories I've seen, Saba, where people say that the interface is glitched out, the controls are backwards. It's like nothing the kids have seen. The analogy I always give people is, imagine practicing, you're the best kickball team in the county. Kickball, though. I take you to a baseball game. How's that going to end? You're not going to be the best baseball team. You might come in 4th or 5th, but that's going to be a fluke. Your skills didn't transfer, even though there's a diamond, and even though there's base runners, and even though there's a pitcher, and even though there's a catcher, is not the same game. I could even make that argument between softball and baseball. And so, I mean, we are messing people up when we say to them, you worked for 180 days and you're just as inadequate as you were last year. That is pretty ugly. And I'm not saying participation trophies. I'm not saying that. I'm just saying the bar, like everything I've seen on CASP looks like a baby SAT. And correct me if I'm wrong, but K-8 is not supposed to be college prep. It's not supposed to be college prep. It's inappropriate to be college prep. And so I have some real concerns about what we're doing to this generation in terms of their self-image. When the state says to you, as a group, you are 31% passing in math. 31% compared to what? If we are the same kids with the same test in New York, they'd be 50% passing. I don't get it. I don't get what the adults are up to with this. And they're just all trying to impress each other with harder and harder tests. Here's an idea. What if we measured how many people got 100% on the test and then made the test doable by human children? What if the smart the cool Tiger Mom districts were all comparing who had the most 100% instead of how many groveled their way through passing. Think about that. Imagine the teacher. Here's the teacher in right now classroom. Oh, you guys. Oh, here's your gum. And research shows that if you chew gum, you're smarter. Here's your magic pencil. It's a special pencil just for today. No, I'm not gaslighting you. Do your best because this will be in the newspaper in September. And the superintendent wants us to look really good. And I know this test drives me crazy. I hate this test. That's the lingo we're giving kids. They're not stupid. They know how we feel about the test. What if right now the 7th graders took the 5th grade test, Saba? We moved the 5th grade test up to 7th. And now it's a contest like this. Bro, we're taking the 5th grade test. I want at least 50% of you to get 100. Crush it. What a paradigm shift, right? Crushing it instead of surviving. Oh, I hope 1% more of you can pass this year. We're like groveling. It's pathetic. It's horrible. You would not see that.
What are some of the things then that you would want to see people change, let's say within the next like actions a principal at a site or a teacher in their classroom could take, say, in the next 6 to 12 months, thinking about next academic year?
Here's the bad news, right? That's the saddle that we're harnessed with. So my number one thing is I just think inoculation, like those kids that would rub poison oak on themselves till they didn't get poison oak. If this is the test that the leaders, finger quote, are going to give us, if this is the test that Ed Code says, then I'm going to prepare my kids for that environment, which is not the same as teaching the test. Because anybody that's listening, it's impossible to teach this test. I could give the kids this test 7 times a year and the scores would not go up. That's how disorienting this test is. So just giving them the test is not going to work. And it's not A, B, A, B, A, B. It's fill in the blanks. There's no way to just A, B your way through it. If you don't put an answer, it's wrong. Like you stop. So the good thing that they do is there are these interim tests. If it was my class, I'd be doing an interim test about once a month at least, just to get kids used to the goofy environment, just so that that's normalized. I just want them to be their best, whatever their best is. And if your best is 50% passing on the math, that's fine. I just don't want you to show up 25% if you should be 50. So I would format to normalize it. The second thing is, this one's even more doable though. This goes all the way back to my first year. I sat down like a new teacher and I taught my way through the book and we did our anthologies and we did all that stuff. I had no idea that what was going to happen on the end of the year test is, this is a normal class in a lot of classrooms. Hey, we're going to read this 7-page story. We'll do popcorn reading. We'll do silent reading. We'll do a little worksheet every day. And on Friday, there'll be a little 8-question quiz. Okay, here's what kids are getting on the state test. Here's 9 stories. 3 are info lit, 2 are literature, 1 is an argument, 4 are persuasive, and there's a poem. You're going to do all those in an hour and a half, bro. Youch. They have never done anything like this in their life. And I think I'm co-opting or using the term incorrectly, but it sounds good to me. I'm going to call it code switching, where kids need to be able to write one genre and then put it away and write another genre and then put it away and then write another genre and then put it away and write another genre in one sitting. There are no times when people normally do that in class because they will say the kids can't do it. To which I will answer, Jack Handy from Saturday Night Live writes the bad poems. Of course not, if you don't train them. So I started creating experiences in my classroom where the kids had to code switch like that. We would do 2 or 3 different things in 1 hour. And like there's one I just made up last year called the Triple Genre Challenge. So I put up a really funny picture, or I've been downloading TikToks lately of like talking bears and stuff. And so then we write 1 paragraph that's narrative, 1 paragraph that's persuasive, and a poem all at once around the 1 picture. I'm asking them to code switch. And I'm actually very comfortable with that because that's a pretty awesome skill. But most teachers don't teach that way because they're stuck in the book. And what they do is this: we're going to do persuasive for a quarter. We're going to do argumentative for a quarter. The test happens at like quarter 2.9 to quarter 3.4. So it's not fully 4th quarter necessarily. It's late in the 3rd quarter. Well, if you're one genre a quarter, that's the one they're getting tested on. One of them you haven't even done yet. Think about it.
Yeah. That's the same way for history. Yeah.
In my English book, we had metaphors were on page 378. Bro, I'm not going to get to page 378 before the test. In the math books, geometry and measurement are towards the end. Guess what's the easiest way to raise your math scores? Measurement and geometry, but they put it at the end. So in my class, I just flip everything over. Metaphor, day one, bro. Let's go day one, metaphor. Day one, metaphor. We do it with TV commercials. Nobody's complaining. We start doing geometry, quarter two, because I'm going to get my biggest boost out of things that I don't normally teach at all. And that's why when kids get to high school, they're like, geometry, what? Because they always got it rammed in the last 2 weeks before the big test. And then everybody was exhausted and they just dumped everything after that. So you got to get out of that cycle. That second part, everybody can fix. Everybody can fix that. And I like to say these two words: intensity and tempo are free. Doesn't cost a dime. They have better intensity and better tempo. And tempo doesn't necessarily mean faster. It just means when. Music has tempo, right? There's quiet and fast tempos. There's loud and slow tempos. So adjust the tempo so that the kids are normalized to the quiz.
Love it. So there's so many people, because of that exact system, that are either looking for other opportunities and they're thinking about other pathways, but not always sure kind of how to make that switch or how to make that, transition. And you shared earlier how you turned your side hustle into like a full hustle. What kind of advice might you have for teachers that are, just tired of the system, that or wanting to just start something on the side in addition to teaching?
Well, the first thing I would tell them is don't get stuck in one district. It makes me sad when people have 20 years of experience and now they can't leave, because being in 7 districts and 2 county offices is what made me better, because I've perspective. And I just had a friend who had worked for 25 years in a district and she thought she hated it. So she got a new job. She hates the new job more than the old job, which is triggering a third move. So she's trying to catch me in 1 year. But one of the big transformations for me was I work in this little tiny school in Eastern Madera County, and I think we're all screwed up. But then I start working with people from the county, and then I go, oh my God, our whole county's screwed up. And then I worked in Fresno County, which is a region of 6 counties, and I was like, oh my God, our whole region's screwed up. Then I start hanging out with people at the state level. I'm like, it's not just my county. It's not just my region. The whole state is screwed up. Then I start talking to people in other states, and I'm like, whoa, the system's broken. And I think what happens is people get stuck at like that 50-foot level and they just think my district is crazy or it's everybody. Everybody. I literally saw, but I can't tell you a district in which everything really works properly from top to bottom. I can tell you districts that have bright spots, but all of them are smart enough to tell you that we're still kind of a disaster. I don't know of any districts. Think about this like in football. There's no Patriots of education. There's nobody that's like, we got this, we're going to win every time. There's districts that have rich kids that score high. That's true. There's districts that have poor kids that do cool things. That's true. But you can't find any place where they said, we bought this brand of curriculum and now everything's okay. Because what happens in the classroom always goes back to, I'm going to talk. You're going to listen quietly. You're going to prove you listened by filling out my quiz. So if you're a teacher that wants to start your own thing, I would say even if you don't live in California, find professional organizations you can hang out with. So like in Massachusetts, MassQ, awesome people. In Michigan, McCall, MACUL. In Texas, TCEA. Start going to events. And I'm going to say something that freaks people out. Pay your own money, dude. If you're going to wait for POs, you're always going to be the man is going to control you. I do side work so that I can go to events, so I can learn more, so I can do more side work. At some point, I'm getting paid for doing side work. If you don't want to invest a couple of $100 to go to a weekend event or an ed camp in your area, then your journey's over right there. If you're going to wait for POs to go to events, your journey's over. So first thing is realize that this is an endemic problem. Second thing is figure out a thing you do that makes the problem go away. What's something you do that makes people go, you know what, that's a good idea.
This season, there's been a theme across leaders and why they are dedicated to education reform. They all had a childhood experience that shaped them into who they are. You heard Jon share his story as a learner. When Jon and I were growing up, there really was only one way to do school. Today, with the technology afforded to us, we can personalize school for every child and adult, actualizing the vision that Dewey had for education. There's a strong correlation between the mental health challenges that we see in children and adults and assessment. When you grow up being told what you are and are not good at through artificial measures, it has a significant impact on your confidence, your motivation, and your self-efficacy. What story do you tell yourself about what you are and are not good at? Where does it come from? Who does it come from? We spend our most formative years in school. Jon painted the reality of what school looks like, and we have to now pause and ask ourselves, is this what we want to accomplish in schools? Is this really the vision that we want to work towards? If not, let's answer, what do we want to accomplish in schools? For the latest articles and podcast episodes, I invite you to visit www.designingschools.org or join me at Ask Miss Q across all my social media channels and let us know, what do you want to accomplish in schools?
It's your turn to join the conversation by sharing what you enjoyed or what questions you have. In a world where time and attention are so valuable, thank you for choosing to listen and for being a part of our Designing Schools community. Leaving a review for the podcast helps others learn about the show, giving them the gift of knowledge and allowing this community to help create access and exposure to ideas and opportunities others may not even know exist.